So, in terms of Atlanta, some of the stuff that's happening in Atlanta is fascinating, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because you've got all the articles, but I would recommend you read it because you really need to know what's happening with regards to the funds. Blackstone, a private equity firm, has spent more than $4 billion on 24,000 rental properties in the last year, making it the largest buyer in the US. It's purchased residents from building and land technology. It's the single biggest family rental division of Blackstone. That's everything from that article. This one here says that private equity firm, hedge funds and individuals are racing to buy in a shrinking pool of foreclosures or distressed homes to rent. They're seeking to profit as prices remain 29% below their 2006 peak, and potential buyers can't get mortgages with the banks restricting credit. Blackstone's global head of real estate said in an interview last week that it's getting harder to acquire properties for profit as competition intensifies. Blackstone, the world's largest private equity firm, is leading investors in transforming an industry that historically was a mom-and-pop business, with Goldman Sachs Group Incorporated estimates is worth $2.8 trillion into an institutional asset class. They've targeted such states as Arizona, California, Florida, and Nevada that were the hardest hit by the housing crash. Competition in Atlanta has pushed out some local investors who have complained they can't compete with the institutional firms that are willing to pay the higher prices. So that was everything from that article. And then this one here was about Atlanta. It's had the largest growth rate in nearly 7 years. It had a sharp turnaround over the past 2 years. House prices are zooming up in more markets amid big declines in supply of homes for sale. The Standard & Poor Case-Shiller Home Price Index that tracks 20 different cities said that Atlanta had risen by 16.5%, the largest increase in its 21-year history. So for me, in terms of Atlanta, it's a very dynamic market, and it's extremely difficult in terms of what's happening on the ground. But for those of you who have met RJ, I'm sure you will agree that he's a fairly dynamic individual himself. So a year ago, we were buying properties on the auctions. That was the easy. You just went to the auctions and bought the properties. Now he's got a myriad of different ways to uncover the real opportunities. You've got to have someone on the ground kicking the doors down to find the opportunities in terms of where the market is and what is happening. And just to give you an example of some of the types of opportunities. There. So, in terms of the demand, what they have done in some of the areas with Atlanta to try and keep the prices competitive and to also keep the yields competitive, they have also looked at some of the further out suburbs. So you'll see here this particular property, it's $90,000, built in 2002. It's got a net yield of 8.5%. And the size of the property is 1,300, so about 130 square meters in terms of that. This property here is about $98,000. It's a brick place. You can see their net yield of about 8%, and the size about 150 square meters. Fortunately, the picture's not a great one there, but we've got all the videos and everything. I'm going to show you now quickly. This one here is actually rented out, and it's $107,000. And again, you can see that these pictures are all pre-rehab in terms of, we could tell because RJ's got a fairly standard, landscaping. This is Covington. I like Covington personally in terms of the area. So this particular property is $123,000. Again, it hasn't been renovated yet. You can see all the landscaping hasn't been done. A net yield there of 7.8.
And then the prices there are including renovation, so everything will be done in full turnkey.
Sorry, what do you mean constructions?
Yeah. In Atlanta, for most people.
The mixture,
it works, and they're used to it.
So here's another property, 127. It's 2,228 square feet, so about 220 square meters. So, you know, very much an American traditional home. We find a lot of people that go over there actually look at the properties and think, you know, wow, I could happily live here myself, you know, in terms of the size. And that one's got a net yield of 8.3%. And then lastly, the kind of the more upper end, about 133, so a mixture between facade and brick. And this one here, net yield of 8.2% and a purchase price of 133. And then lastly, that one body sewer is actually tenanted as well already. And this one here is 2004. It's 1,900 square meters. And I just want to show you the video here quickly.
This is Studio RA Servicing, and today we're here at 301 Clarion Drive in Carrollton, Georgia. This is in Mountain Creek subdivision. Let me give you a quick tour of the subdivision. It's a nice, quiet subdivision, well maintained. This home here, as you can see, is
So I'm not going to go through the full video, but on any property we've got the full surround. It goes around the suburb, it goes into the property in terms of what's happening. Yep.
Scott, I just want to ask that rental and that yield, is that all inclusive of the management fee
Yes.
to get it rented out?
So it's a net yield basically.
That's the
So it takes into account the rates and taxes, it takes into account the management
All
fee,
expenses.
the expenses, yeah. So outside it's pre-tax basically.
Okay.
So it would be a net yield pre-tax. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You happy with that, Stuart? Would you agree with me? Yeah.
Typically, what is the length of the lease and what's the escalations to that? And does the managing agent guarantee occupancy?
Okay. So a couple of questions there. Everything in America is dependent on the area. So in Orlando, traditionally you're looking at a 12-month lease. In Memphis, the lease is about 23 months on average. In Atlanta, it's a 3-year lease. They've got an option there where they call it a three-year lease option. So the tenant actually goes into the house. They have the option to buy the house in 3 years at a higher rate. It's not an exit strategy to use your thing. It's just to get the right type of tenant into the property and to get them to sign on a 3-year lease. You get them to also sign at a higher rent than say what they're getting, you know, in the same street. Because what happens is the mom and pop arrive and they say, right, the renovations are really good, high standard, this is what I want. Now, the guys that we work with, the management company there, they get thousands of applications. It's not about getting someone through the door, it's about getting a quality person through the door. So to answer your question, they don't guarantee the rent. It's not a rental guarantee, it's not added in any price anywhere or whatever. And it's very much a case of trying to get the best tenant into the property, because that's what's going to determine your long-term return. Does that make sense? In terms of what? So I mean, we have found, student be able to test this, sometimes it might take a little bit longer in terms of, but what RJ always says, just wait until you got the right person to move into the property. But generally they say to us, you should be working on a vacancy of between 30 to 45 days on average. Okay. Does that answer all your questions?
30 to 45 days over the 3-year period? Or
Well, because you get, generally the person moves in and stays for the 3 years. They do have a guarantee in place. This is the guarantee they do have. If someone leaves within the first 12 months, they'll replace them without paying the new fee. So the placement fee will be.
And they've also got an eviction guarantee as well. So if they place the wrong guy in the first year and he doesn't pay, they will evict him at their cost and place a new tenant at their cost.
And then the escalation on the rentals?
Oh, sorry, I didn't answer that question. So in somewhere like Orlando, what I've found in first world countries, I've invested in London, Australia and America, tends to stick just to inflation. So it's not as aggressive as South Africa. You're looking at, my budgeting, we work on 2%. Okay? In Atlanta, when they sign that 3-year lease, there's no escalation. So they fix the person in for 3 years, and that's the way. So that's about getting the right tenant. But again, their attitude is get the person at the right price from the start, and not necessarily worry from an escalation perspective. I understand where you're coming from, but it's also different in a low inflation environment. It's not quite the same as here.
3 years with no vacancies is better than an escalation.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the attitude. Try to get the right tenant in. Make sure you've got the right person up front.
One thing, Scott, with these houses are what, 10 or 20 years old? Is that
No. Generally less than 10 years old.
Because when John Chin was talking, he was saying that the resale stock, as that market's gone, and there's new building stock coming to market now in the peripheral market. So with the fairly newly built houses, and yet that's a bit different from these examples here.
Different markets are different. I'm going to show you some stuff now quickly. Everywhere's different. You know, the thing with America, in South Africa, I think we can pretty much safely say that kind of what's happening in Johannesburg is happening in Cape Town. Pretty much, hey? Yes, no? Do you agree with me, disagree with me? But I mean, it's not stark contrast. You know, Cape Town's not booming and Joburg's busting. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in America, there's massive stark contrast all over the country. So if you're saying to me what's happening in the American market, you've got to be very specific which market. And so to answer your question, and I'm going to show you some of the new construction in terms of where we're at.